Hello everybody, welcome back. Last episode we discussed our universal boundary conditions. And again, what those are just empirically obvious facts. Most of them have been well articulated throughout physics as known already today. We discussed how speciality is an axiom and how we prove that axiom, or how I proved that axiom, but how the logic was to develop to prove that axiom and show that special was just a specific case of speciality. Just whenever you say the word special, you're using a specific form of a concept called speciality, which is just the tendency to differentiate for sexual antagonism, to attract a mate, your style, your values, whatever your interests are, your personality. So now today, again, how I record these episodes is I just record a big chunk and then I edit it like anybody else. So this will either be 1, 2, 3 episodes, I'm not sure, it just depends how much insight and how much I can continue to discuss the topics. But today our topics will be more on the iteration function, just how our sequence of sounds iterate with consonants and resonance, vowels and consonants to form logical structures. And how we use those logical structures to transmit useful information to one another. So we'll be discussing the iteration functions, aspects of language that are empirically evident. We will be discussing structured physics. We'll be discussing a lot of what electricity is, what flow is, again, touching base on all of these big concepts in physics that are already known. So there'll be our two big points. Is just the iteration function of language, which is us trying to differentiate sensorality with a C from with an S. Sensorality with a C going to inanimate objects. When you see censorship spelled with a C, that is used incorrectly. It should be censorship with an S, right? We have senses with an S. I am a sensory being, S-E-N-S-O-R-Y. I am not sensory, C-E-N-S-O-R-Y. So what I'm doing is showing the consistency of the use of the letter S and the use of the letter C for sensorality, the ability to, or the desire or the tendency to differentiate. And sensorality, differentiation would be, again, sensorality with an S, differentiate for sexual antagonism. My pool table over here is not reproducing sexually, so it differentiates with a C. And so that's what we're doing to derive our axiom. And we're just discussing and showing how what we've done with our physical empirical properties, rhythm and vibration, how they were not integrated into the ontology of physics properly, and now we're doing that, and we're showing the consistency up to the language used to describe that physical phenomenon. And that's already what you do. If you've never thought about language before whatsoever in sort of like an actual rigorous empirical way, you've experienced or you've been exposed to some physical process, and then you've associated some sequence of sound, a word, to that process, and that is how you articulate meaning right now today. You just have probably never thought about it. And so there is order to that. There are order of operations in the same way there are order of operations in mathematics with numerics, with numbers. So those will be our big two ideas, and we'll go from there. We'll start with the language stuff, and then move over into the physics. So we discussed a little bit on range. Again, I didn't have great insight or how to explain it, but that sensorality with an S emerges from sensorality with a C. The electron came before the Brad. Me talking right here, I'm made of electrons, so the electrons had to exist to be configured into me. And so sensorality with an S has to map the entirety of sensorality with a C. Sensorality with a C is the basis. Sensorality with the S is the range, the differentiation. And so all of the, right, it should be extremely empirically obvious, but I'm wearing socks. The concept of a sock, something to keep your foot warm, is universal. I might have a black sock on, somebody might have a blue sock on, but we both individually understand the function of a sock. And so the blue sock versus the black sock, that's more speciality, the differentiation. We're trying to define sensorality, but speciality, the previous axiom, the differentiation, the blue versus black is to be different for whatever reason. Maybe it's a work reason, maybe it's a romantic reason, whatever the reason may be. So we're trying to define sensor with an S, but speciality is the axiom that we've already proven. So that's what I just kind of discussed. And again, once again I have misspoken, but I'm sure you followed the logic fine. Because the logic underneath the words are what matters. All of this language stuff, the nitty gritty or the nuanced details, is literally just if you get what I'm saying, you don't care if the word starts with an S or with a C. There's a ton of people that aren't literate. They can't write, or they can't read, but they can speak and articulate logical ideas fine. The purpose is the logic behind the words. And just because I'm doing 360 between the legs in terms of logical proofing doesn't mean it's necessary to get the core of what's going on. But anyway, so we try to play with something in terms of range. Again, your numerator is the base. In the physical world, you have to have some object that you're dividing. So we had some intuition there, but then again, with sensorality, the range has to map the entire or cover the entire basis. In the same way, if you had, again, concentric spheres, one here, this is sensorality with a C, and completely surrounding it is a bigger sphere, sensorality with an S. And so we're trying to show that connection between sensorality with an S and sensorality with a C, and that will give us our axiom. And we know the proofing method works. We've already identified the form of the solution. It is what it is. Sensorality, the specific form or the specific solution, and now we just need to get to the next axiom where we can connect that and solidify sensorality as an axiom. So again, continuing to distill the logic there and getting down to the letter by letter. Iteration, to show that through the iteration function of language. But again, just some logic still has not been completely ironed out for me there. But we discussed that, the words in generality, how words build upon each other in the same way concepts do, in the same way the physical world does. That's what I'm saying. Vibration stabilizes into light, light stabilizes into mass. Buzz, 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 boof, buzz, 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 poof. Kind of like a power-up animation you've seen on a video game. When you get to the next level, or you can do the next attack sequence or whatever, you level up. The universe levels up, or it builds upon itself. In the same way, if you throw two rocks into a pond and it causes waves, and those waves hit each other, the amplitudes and the troughs will create another wave pattern. And so they build on each other. But, right, so we discussed the fundamental stability of two, right? We live in 3 dimensions. All systems in 3 dimensions are black bodies. They radiate. Nothing can be created or destroyed. It just changes the form and the energy content. But that fundamental stability is manifest in language through stuff like potato or potato, tomato or tomato. And so the evidence of those types of little conundrums is literally showing you the iteration. But the reason sometimes people say potato or potato is literally, again, the iteration of the syllability, the different syllables and how order they come in. And so if you, depending on what preceding and proceeding word you use around potato or potato, is going to change your pronunciation naturally. And this comes up in my derivation all of the time. In the same way that the way you emphasize the same exact word, present versus present, it's the same word, same letters, just the emphasis is different, the intonation is different, changes the meaning. But the reason the emphasis has changed is because the sequence of syllability. So that is another evident thing, and again with 2, we have again fundamental stability of 2. But another one I wanted to show or point out was contradiction when we're talking about building words or expanding words in the same way. Our universe is growing, the universe is expanding, our language, our lexicon, our vocabulary, our ontology is expanding. Well, the individual words have to expand. And we've shown some initial logical connection, nothing super rigorous or insightful, about, again, 3 prime numbers, 3, 5, and 7. More generally, just 3 elements, 3. But we expand and contract these words going back from generality and specificity, and then we connect those, and then we use metaphor. We map that same exact logic into a different scenario, into a different context, and it's the exact same decision-making process. And so I wanted to show you that with a word, right? Contradiction. What is a contradiction? A contradiction is something that is ironic, something that does not make sense. You say, if I go left, there's one store in the universe. If I'm walking down a path and I go left, the store is going to be there. And then the next person comes down and says, there's one store in the universe. If you walk down this path, it goes two ways. You go down to the right, the store is going to be down the right path. That is a contradiction. You have two bits of information and it doesn't make sense. It is not consistent. And so, contradiction, we know what that is. How about a contradiction? Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's how the syllability presents, right? And that's this word kind of specific to medicine. A contradiction is when you have two medicines that might have some adverse side effect because they interact with each other. They contradict each other physically. So very clearly we can say contradiction is more general and it maps to a lot more things more general, but specific to sentience. People are stating logical things that are not consistent, therefore they don't make sense. They contradict. Contradiction, when you have two molecules that just cause an adverse reaction to our biological or fleshy being, what you have is something specific to molecular sensation with a C. Right? The molecules aren't sitting there making a sentient choice, they're just reacting based off physical and biochemical laws. Well, biochemical laws that are the manifestations of physical laws. And so contradiction is to sensorality. That's a word, a logical thing to sensorality with a C. Contradiction is something to the sensorality with an S. It maps the contradiction more generally. The range, again, the sensorality with an S, the range mapping the basis, sensorality with a C. But you literally see just the building of contradiction as you insert the syllable in, which is also a word, again, discussing, again, the completeness of word. You just put that literally right in contradiction, after the A. You just put an in after the A. So it's a clear example of logically it exactly maps, and linguistically the letters, you literally see the expansion. The universe expands, the words have to expand to describe that expanding universe. So that was a good example. But irony versus iron. This is just another one. We've discussed at length how the sound E at the end of a word indicates generality, and keeping that generality preserved opens up the word to build more logical connections. And so, just iron versus irony, right? What is that? Well, a contradiction is ironic. But that's, you say you're going to do one thing, right? You have Sally accuses, she's dating Billy, and Sally accuses Billy of cheating on her the whole time, and Billy was never cheating on Sally, and Sally was cheating on Billy the whole time. That's ironic. And so, iron versus irony, right? Ironic, the form of irony. But physically and historically, right, we have the iron catastrophe. In classical physics, when you can't have the model of the atom, wouldn't make sense at iron because the nucleus would be too heavy and it would pull the electrons down and it would spiral and the universe wouldn't have any shape and we wouldn't be here talking, right? So if you don't know the history of physics, go look that up, big thing. But again, a big contradiction within physical theory historically, right? We have irony, which has a general meaning ending in E. We have ironic, and then we have the iron catastrophe, literally the element iron, right? And so it's ironic. But that shows, again, the logic mapping from speciality and sensorality. Once again, physical, the iron catastrophe, and ironic, logical contradiction. What other things can we say? What sets and characteristics already exist in language? Again, we discussed numeric relationships before, or three tenses, the examples we used in the previous episodes. But we have, we already have, by natural evolution of language, we already have differentiation in groups and sets and classes that we use for language. The most fundamental one being formality, right? In most, I can't say all, but the vast majority of most languages, if not all of the language, there's a formal tense, right? There's literally a tense in language in which you would use to speak to someone more, has a higher seniority than you, or is more, has earned honor or respect or whatever. Someone you're trying to show respect to is literally fundamentally ingrained into a tense of language. So, formal versus informal speech, again, the dichotomy of two is there once again. But I would say that is the most foundational one. Again, that's just my opinion, but it's certainly a facet of language. We've already differentiated language into a bunch of other things, like, again, generality, specificity. Again, we discussed the lingos of all of your different work things: police officers, chefs, teachers, accountants, business owners, whatever. They all form, because they have unique situations in their profession, and they form specific lingos to that, where people would know the abbreviations and the acronyms. Whereas if you just took the acronym itself outside the context, somebody from the business world might not understand something that a medicine person is saying. But what letter does a word start with? That's already a differentiation we have. What language are we speaking? English, Russian, Spanish, French. Those are differentiations in language, literally languages. And so, but it's all, again, human beings all experience the human condition the same way, and individuals all experience individuality the same way. And so, those exist, again, different letters. What words/syllables that rhyme? Again, we've discussed that rhyming shows they're more similar and more close in their logical pyramid, their logical connection pyramid tree thing that we use for our visual. And so, when we want to describe things with more insight, we need something that's novel and correct, right? You can say something that's novel pretty easily, but it's not going to make any sense. Like it's literally just a random string of words. Pillar, foosball, up, down, adamantly, square, right? That's new. I doubt anyone said that sequence of words. It meant absolutely nothing. And so we know that things that rhyme are logically closer to each other, so you want to differentiate more, the more poignant, the more value, the more valuable the information, the more empirical that information is going to be. And in the same way, you have inflection and an intonation on a given word. The words that you naturally emphasize in conversation, the way I'm doing right now, those words are the tension points of where the logic pivots to something else and where you can build off of it. Like little Legos, logical Legos. But again, the syllables in the words, but syllables themselves, we went over diphthongs, the number of syllables, right? Specifically to our axiom that we're trying to derive, right? Speciality, right? 3 is our first prime number, our basis. That's the unity of 3, the 3 in all of our stuff. 5 being the second prime number, and 7 being the last in numerics. And now again, generally we just have 3 elements of thing. 3 iterations, 3 resonance patterns, 3 stabilities, 3 shadows on the wall. But the number of syllables, again, so then speciality is 5. So I forget what the complete generality that I took derived speciality from, but again, it's all in my actual derivation, which again I mailed to people or emailed to people, which I've been doing for almost a decade now. But you build the generality to 7 syllables, and then you solidify it, because remember, nothing's closed, and so we have to go down 7. Again, super nuanced mathematics, but 7 goes to the dynamic limit into infinitesimality, to 8 to the repetition to start over, and we just start reiterating. I'm not going to try to give you intuition to that. That is Brad being big science guy, and you just say yes and write it down. But that is there. But the number of syllables, again, there's 80% there for a rigorous statement if I haven't already articulated or refining or reiterating or refreshing or improving the logic of the number of syllables to the generality and specificity between 3, 5, and 7, pairing them with prime numbers. Again, just the order of alphabets in general. Now, different, like we said, the Cyrillic alphabet is used for a variety of different languages. Bulgarian originated in Bulgaria, Russian, Belarusian, Serbian. Some of them have slight, like Macedonian kind of uses it, but also has a slightly different diction. But then when you get down into like Armenian or Georgian, the scripts are way different. But just all of that, again, all of this, now we can start making relations in definitive logical proofs. Mathematical proofs extend what is known mathematics to literally all of language. Kind of a cool result. This is fucking hilarious. I'm sitting here casually lecturing on subjects that are literally not known to the rest of the species. And each lecture has like 50 theorems and 3 proofs in it, in and of itself. Oh boy. And then, but another group we have is function of words. Again, is it a noun? Is it a verb? Adjective? Adverb? Is it in a prepositional phrase? Is it a direct object? Indirect object? And so again, noun and verb are really the functional requirements, or they are, but we've discussed them in this series extensively or enough. But I think the last thing there's a couple more things, so let me make sure I'm still recording. So the last little couple points for the linguistics today before we move on to the actual physics, or just to not move on or switch over to physics, we have some things that I found difficulty with the iteration function of language, meaning like when you're literally trying to take a word that you use, that you know how to use logically, that you're not sure what the spelling is. For example, the one that I used myself was onomatopoeia, right? You know what an onomatopoeia is? Which again, we covered it. It's just the words that indicate or are said in a way that we go from sound to word, so the word, you're trying to go from word to sound, right? Hiss, it's onomatopoeia. It's saying the word hiss is presented in the same way a snake would hiss, and the word hiss represents the snake doing that action. But if you take a word that you know logically for sure, and then you try to spell it, and you take one that you don't know, there's certain parts that because you're thinking and you're trying to preserve the sound that you hear in conversation and you hear in the wild, so to speak, or just in normal empirical interaction. And so you're thinking of the sound and trying to to recall the letters that represent that. And so onomatopoeia was a tough one, but the difficulty, and I think a lot of people will do this, or this will resonate with a lot of people, but the suffixes ly, ally, allly, and ality are all very difficult. I don't say difficult, but it's very nuanced in terms when you're switching over the syllability of the vowel. And so, right, I just have two examples. Right, when I was spelling out the word competent, right, a lot of the words that end in ent or ant are difficult in terms of when you're in the zone deriving, spelling those words, are because there's a lot of difference or something. I don't know. Again, it just stuck out to me, and I do it a lot. And another one, again, competence, that's to the ent, ant, ence, or ance. The ence at the end of a word, the a and the e is always, again, pivoting between those two vowels depending on the word and the form of the word you're trying to use. Does get kind of hairy in terms of spelling. Another one I really liked was practical, right? If it's practical, right, we have practicality, but practically, right? How do you spell practically? Is it practically? Is it you just put practic and then ly at the end? Is it practically? Is it cally? And so there's a lot of those times where it's very natural. It's like, I don't know how many L's or Y's to put. And so, again, that was just something that stuck out, but enough for me to write down. Same thing with public, right? Is it publicly? Is it public ly? Is it publicly? Is it public then ally? Or is it publicly ally? There's a right answer. I didn't look it up, but the point being is that's a natural. The A and the E, iterating that through language is not apparent, even if I would say I'm a moderately good speller. I'm certainly not the best or savant, certainly not savant, or like my derivation is the what the fuck level, but spelling is substantially above average, but nothing like savant or world renowned or world class or anything like that. But that is one difficulty for the iteration function, or something that's not clear. But you need to use a new word approximately 7 times before you solidifies into your own vocabulary. So once again, another iteration with the numeric. Once again, it's that 7. It's that completeness, 7 to completeness, 7 days in a week, and we start over, 7 uses of a vocab word, and it's in your vocab, 7 divisions of your first cell, and then your zygote, bam. And so 7 is to that infinitesimality limit. How about A-E? In the English language, for vowels, we have A-E-I-O-U, and sometimes Y is the phrase, the little slogan you'll learn in school. And so what can we make of that? Right? Then we can ask questions like, why is A the first letter of the alphabet? And then answer in some sort of efficiency or consolidation to efficiency. Again, that's super broad-reaching net. Now, how can we extend our logical pyramid, dig deeper and deeper and deeper until we get to the foundational proof level? Because we know we have our lower bound, right? Everything's not infinite. Infinite to the bigger, right? Divergent infinities, those are to the universe. The definable universe is the observable, or the observable universe is the definable universe. The lower limit, the Planck length, or the measurement of quark bounding for our energy scales. So we have our upper and lower bounds, and then there's kind of a sweeping thing, is we just have to know that the order of the actual vowels themselves. Y is A first, E in the 5th position, I in the 9th position, O in the 15th, U in the 21st. Can we have some sort of, again, show maybe there's only 3 vowels and it's just some sort of modification of, again, the syllability, the physical sounds that we can make, and how we can modify them. So something, again, this is why it's a new subject. There's the low-hanging fruit is just everywhere. You can think of, you can come up with any sort of questions with all of this foundational proofing, and we know solutions exist. But what significance can we make of that? Again, we've talked extensively about the sound E represented by Y, meaning generality, and extending the logic and keeping it open. But how about noun-verb agreement? In addition to our formal and informal conjugations in diction or in languages, there's also noun-verb agreement versus plurality and singularity. So plurality meaning more than one too many, counting systems in any native tribe. So we have clear differentiation between talking about one, something that's singular, and things that are plural, right? There's one singularity and everything else is a plurality. We can play, again, obviously there's clear some sort of connection between singularity as they use it in fundamental physics, but again, that's to the intuition that you guys can't, I mean, it's when I talk about the stabilization of R0 or R1, or even really R2, it's just so far beyond you guys. And it's not saying that it's like so complicated you can't understand it. It's that it's so basic you can't articulate it. Like there's nothing to say about things that there aren't words for in the most fundamental empirical way. Logically, unification generalizes. Again, we have the motivation in fundamental physics to unify, and then the forces, which is again another massive chunk of logic in physics, just to slap that on there randomly. But the motivation we covered is misguided. Again, we're showing fundamental relations between words. There was no unification, but unification in this sense would again be showing it is what it is the form of all solutions to anything where logic is applied, which is all subjugation, which is all subjects: math, physics, engineering, art, history, law, race cart building, anything you can think of that uses logic, which is everything that is anything, or you want to speak about, it's going to present in this form and with these characteristics. And so when you unify something, again, you go up the pyramid to, right, it is what it is, and then you show that differentiating into all of the different subjects and the different lingos and blah, 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 blah. And then you work your way up and down, the general, specific, and then you find that middle ground where it's not a super extreme, where it is what it is or nothing matters. You find some nuance where you provide some insight, and then if it's fundamental, that becomes an axiom. If not, it's a theorem. And again, everybody speaks in theorems all of the time. Everyone speaks. If you can articulate a complete sentence or express something, you are demonstrating these properties. One, because you're a physical being and you can't break the law of physics. Right? You can't do something that's impossible to do. But you're going to do these things instinctually because this is what you've learned. We're going to review Gödel's theorems. I already have a whole video on that. If you want to go watch that. But I'll review that again. It seems like another time to refresh on that. Talked about set sizes previously before I restarted my camera. But again, just what sets can we establish? And again, there's already sets that we've already differentiated in language, which sound, which syllable, how many syllables, numerics and all. What statements can we cite about the sizes of sets, which I think would be the first thing. Or again, that's where my intuition's at of what to do next. But just what definitive statements can we prove with the set sizes, with all of this fundamental proofing behind the consistency of language? And that's the second part of Gödel's theorem, which I demonstrated was incorrect, which is way more powerful than saying, conjecture. A visceral empirical proof is life. It's living. It's happening. It's me. Alright. Oh, goodness. But, so I thought we covered some things pretty well there. I'm actually going to cut it off here, and then I'll record the electricity and flow stuff here in a little bit. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.